You are listening to Therapeutic Astrology Podcasts in short TAP. And I'm so happy that you are with us today because I am interviewing Vicki Werner. And I'm really curious about what we're going to talk about, really. So welcome, Vicki.
Thank you so much. I'm grateful to be here.
So I found you through your book called The Secret to Healing and Recovery. And I think someone like me you have to read that book. And I heard it on audio. It's you reading it, is it?
Yes, that's correct. I narrate it.
You narrate it, yeah. So it's really authentic like that. And
I think it's important to share your own voice.
Yeah, especially when it's so personal than that this is. So when you read the introduction to the book, Vicki Werner died in 2012. Yeah, I kind of just want to hear you about that. What is the considerations around formulating it like that?
Well, by all accounts, I was dead. I left my body. I was no longer in the body for 8 minutes, and so yes, I had that experience. It's typically called a near-death experience. I had an option to continue on and no longer be in this physical body. And due to what I saw on the other side, I knew that it was important that I came back.
Yeah. So, well, it grabbed my attention anyway. And then when you hear the book, it's also a lot about, well, the experience in being with and being in uncertainty. Because, of course, and not of course, because dying can happen in many ways, but for you it was you had a real illness going on for a while, right?
Yes, that is correct. My illness, if you'd like, I can start with how that all began.
Yes.
Okay,
Please do.
begin. Let's begin at the very beginning
Okay.
of bringing everybody up to 2012. When in 2004, my husband was a medical doctor. He here in the United States, and he also practiced. He originally was an obstetrician gynecologist, so he delivered thousands of babies, but due to an injury, he moved more into alternative medicine. And due to when he was also a surgeon, and as a surgeon, he helped participate in a vast number of medical procedures, and one of those was a cancer treatment of a woman who had vaginal cancer, cervix cancer, and the doctor who was in charge they were doing radiation treatment on this woman, and the doctor who was in charge didn't seal the capsules properly, and so when they turned that on, the woman was screaming because it was leaking all over inside of her inner leg, her inner thighs, and vaginally, and his heart was so pulled, he ran in to help her. That was everything against protocol because his badge went black immediately, which was a sign he had tremendous radiation poisoning. And very shortly after that, he developed malignant melanoma, where he had tumors. He had 3 tumors on his brain and 4 on his spine, and he was given 6 weeks to live. He went into deep prayer and was guided on how to treat his cancer for himself. And he, rather than dying, he lost 40 pounds. He had regained vibrancy. He did parasite cleanses. He worked on his emotions and was able to recover full health. All of his staff was very interested of how that was happening, and the people in his world. So he really leaned into alternative medicine. And by the time I married him, he was fully into alternative medicine.
Right.
Unfortunately, that was a threat to the traditional medical world because getting people better isn't necessarily the goal. And so he in 2004, I was pregnant with our youngest child. I had a 1-year-old in my arms, and 6 U.S. Marshals entered our business, handcuffed and shackled my husband in front of me. They accused him of a crime he did not commit, and my husband was in prison for 5 months. We fought that journey for many, many years. We thought it was going to be an open and shut case. We thought, well, this is so easy. Unfortunately, there was a goal to remove him from having any kind of authority in the medical world.
So crazy.
He was yes, it was crazy. It was
Mm,
crazy. During that time, there was a lot of alternative medical doctors who lost their life, and
okay.
on a public way, they were. It was said that they committed suicide. All of their families said that that was not the case. So he arrived home weeks before our baby was due, and I was grateful to have my husband home. But I lived every single moment in a high level of PTSD. I was so traumatized by that experience, being pregnant and having a baby. We lost our business. We were at ground zero. We lost everything. He no longer practiced medicine, and we really were on an emotional and physical level at ground zero. And by 2012, my mind and body's maladaptive stress response was my new normal. I lived in a high level of stress. I existed in a high level of stress, so frightened that that would happen again. And stress breaks down the body,
Yeah.
breaks down the mind, and we were constantly in search for healing. And that year in 2012, we on that summer we went to Peru in our search for healing. We participated in an ayahuasca ceremony, all to help relieve trauma from the body. We were just so traumatized from that, and I really wanted to get to the other side. But unfortunately, I became even more ill, more weak. I was chronically nauseous. My body shook. My nervous system was just very fragile. And so in December of that year, I was just chronically sick. And in December of that year, I was laying in my bed, and my whole room turned into a soft, warm glow. And there was a pull from my core, and a gentle lifting sensation. And then suddenly I was standing at the foot of my bed, staring at my body, and very, very aware of all of my senses. I could see that my hair was very disheveled because of all the restlessness. My face was very contorted because I was held in a chronic state of pain. When people ask the scale of 1 to 10, it was a 28. I was in
Right.
really, really extreme pain. My husband was with our young children down the hall watching television. I heard him laugh at something on the television, and so immediately I was transported and standing in the living room watching my family. Uh, I had emotions because he was watching The Simpsons on television. I don't know if you have that show,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah, we
it's
do. And you were like thinking the children shouldn't see this.
yes, yes. So you still keep your emotions. I was annoyed he
Yeah,
was watching that television show.
yeah,
I had a great deal of love for them, and it was very clear that they were not aware that I was there.
yeah.
And for some reason, we were immediately transported to this very long pathway. On the pathway, at the top of the path were my husband and our children. I was very confused as to why I was there. They all looked like they were in a great deal of distress. My husband he said, "I love you, babe. I will be okay." And tears were streaming down his face. My children looked like they were in distress, and each one of them said, "It's okay. I will be okay too." And I even had more confusion until
Yeah.
I got to our youngest, who the one I was pregnant with when my husband was taken. She was now 7 at this time, 7 or 9. One of them was 7 and one is 9.
Yeah.
So she was 7 at this time, and she was just clinging to her father. She was sitting on his lap, clinging to her father, and I could tell she was in a great deal of distress, and the
Mm.
trauma was too much for her. And so she couldn't respond. But I wanted to stay. I wanted to say, I'm here, I'm going to stay with you. But there was something pulling me away from my family. Further on the path were my siblings and my parents all standing together. Beyond them were family, extended family members, there were friends. And it was as though everyone who would be impacted by me dying was there to tell me that they would be okay. Nobody asked me to stay. Nobody pleaded with me not to go or that I would be missed. They all said the exact same words: I
Yeah.
will be okay. And before me was a very large building that was what you would assume would be a archetype of a haunted mansion in a movie. It
Right.
had sharp spires on the roof. There were black ravens perched on the roof staring down at me. The yard was very broken down. The fence was broken. The tree was dead. The grass was dead.
Oh.
Everything was very dilapidated and dark.
Uh-huh.
And in my life, I avoid anything frightening.
Okay.
Because I don't like to activate my nervous system. But
Mm.
at this point, I wasn't frightened at all. I entered that space and immediately everything transformed. The building went from a dark, sharp, and frightening space to a beautiful, illuminated building of light. The ravens transformed into white doves. The yard transformed into this beautiful, vibrant love. I could feel the emanation of love from the building itself. And I entered the space and I was met by three beings of light. They were these beautiful celestial entities. They told me that this pathway was my soul's representation of my journey home. They said no one said that they would miss me or that begged for me to stay because their consciousness was not prepared for me to die, and that I was in transition due to a great amount of illness due to trauma.
Mm.
And at that point, I looked exactly like I looked in my bed. And immediately my whole body dropped from me, and it looked like my body dropped like a old outfit on the floor. It had no structure and form, and I could see that it was my body, but there was zero structure. And immediately three more beings walked in. Two of them picked up my discarded shell. Another one carried a bowl of crystal water with a crystal sponge. The sponge was very soft and started bathing that layer of my body. And they said that they were
Right.
bathing this layer to help heal this layer. And I know we'll talk about that in just a
Yeah.
moment,
Yeah. Yeah.
but from there, they moved me to three large statues. These statues were all in gold and precious gems, and they were about 15 feet high. The first one was the most illuminated, but beyond those statues was this darkened passageway. And they told me that beyond these statues, if I chose to go beyond these statues into this passageway, that I would not be returning home to my family. I knew that it was the barrier between the physical and the spiritual realm. And they told me at that time that I was being given three gifts, and the first one was the gift of sight. Now, rather than when most people have a near-death experience, they have a life review where they see their own life and the life that they lived up to that point. I wasn't shown a life review. I was shown how my family would live their lives without me. And
Oh.
so I saw how my husband went into deep grief and isolated himself from family, how our oldest daughter moved home to help raise her younger sisters, how my children struggled a great deal because people in their world didn't know how to associate with them, not
Yeah.
having a mother. And it was very challenging, but I saw that all of them actually eventually were okay. As they entered into adulthood, they figured out their new normal. And just like most people who have lost a loved one eventually got to the other side and were at some level of okay.
Yeah.
However, then they showed me my youngest daughter again, and they showed me that they told me that she had a very important life purpose. They did not tell me what that purpose was, which I think was beneficial, of course, because I would have influenced that.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, however, she would not live out her purpose without me,
Yeah.
and that she would not develop properly due to the trauma that she was. And so she actually, what the images I saw, she was mute. stopped talking, stopped communicating, isolated herself, lived a very, very different life than what she actually has lived out. And so, of course, as a mother, that pulled my heart. And I turned to them and I said, I have to go back. Sophie needs me.
So
Immediately,
like, so just I'm in this image. So you're at this, what is this big statue, and it's like this is the choice point, right?
Correct.
And
Correct.
then they say they give you 3 gifts, and one is
Correct.
of sight. Does that mean that you got to see the life that they would live without you? Is that what they meant by the gift of sight?
I think so. However, I've analyzed that a great deal
Okay,
because
yeah.
I'm not sure. However, over the years, I've developed a lot of sight, intuitive sight. I think there was a little bit of that. I think the sight was also to show me how possibilities in the future of my family, and I think there's still layers to that. And I don't know
Sure.
what those other 2 gifts were. However,
Right.
so I'm still developing that, and all the these years later, 10 years later, I think it's not 100% clear for me.
Wow. I'm having chills. Okay, so the reason why you don't know the next 2 is because you took a choice then. You made a choice.
Correct.
To
Correct.
what? To what? Is it like go back?
I turned to them and
Right.
I said, I have to go back. My daughter Sophie needs me.
Right.
And instantaneously I was back in my body, and instantaneously I was back in unimaginable pain. Now
Oh,
let me paint a picture about what my world was like.
yeah.
When that happened, I was so weak and fragile that that evening, my husband brought our children in, which he did every night, to circle around the bed to pray for me. And he prayed for my healing. He prayed for our children to have strength. And Sophie was standing on the side of the bed, right closest to my up by my face. And he finished the prayer, and she leaned into my head and whispered. I could feel the warmth of her against me, but I was so fragile I could scarcely respond. But I heard her whisper, I need you, mommy. And I wanted, of course, to say, I know, baby, I'm here. I know I'm going to heal. I give you my word that I'm going to heal. However, I was so fragile I couldn't speak. Had been broken down so much the few days before that. When I would try to talk, nobody understood me. I felt like I was yelling, and the exhaustion that it was just to communicate on the physical level was too much. And apparently I was down to a tiny minute whisper and very garbled in my language. So there was no way for me to communicate. And I could feel the tears stream down my face and pool into my ears, and it just deepened my attention on wanting to heal. However, I was bedridden for an additional 8 months. On an average day, my body shook very violently for about 8 to 10 hours every day. I couldn't digest anything. Uh, I was allergic or severely reactive to nearly 500 foods. I lived on bone broth and rice, very, very simple foods, very broken down, cooked down. I was in just, my nerves just were on fire all of the time. Everything ached quite a bit. And of course, my brain and body, my emotional state were very, very challenged. So it was
Yeah.
a very long, long journey. And the premise of my book, The Secret to Healing and Recovery, was written for those who are struggling and have no answers, and that you feel like you're on a very isolated, heavy, long journey alone. And so I integrate what it's like to be on that path, and then
Right.
hopefully coming to the other side as vibrant and whole.
Yeah, as you have so personally undergone that. Wow. And that is really what struck me about the book, that it wasn't focusing only on the near death experience, but it's the whole course of illness
Correct.
that you're
Correct.
very open and honest about, which is very helpful when you are suffering yourself, or have been, or going to, because we are like, this is a condition for human beings that we can become ill. And like you said, especially when you have been through something like that, so traumatic,
Hmm.
is that how you see it? Just to get that straight, is that how you see it? You said you had PTSD symptoms, and then you had the illness afterwards.
Yes. So, initially, PTSD, post-traumatic stress
Yeah,
disorder,
thank you for
uh,
saying it clearly.
is originally, they thought that was just war veterans who would have a traumatic event fighting in the war, and they came back very dysregulated in their nervous system. Their mind was constantly in that sympathetic response. Now, there's two conditions that we either reside in. We're either in the parasympathetic state, which is the state of rest, regeneration, digestion, healing, and recovery and repair, or we're in the sympathetic state. The sympathetic state is our fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, our response to stress. And in that sympathetic state, your body's not going to worry about creating a baby. It's not going to worry about digesting a food or focusing on creating a life that you desire. Your body's focus is on survival. And so everything is sent signals from the brain into the body. It shunts energy from the prefrontal cortex where you have critical thinking. It shunts energy away from digestion and moves it to your limbs, dilates your eyes so you can have a greater vision. Your senses become more aware and acute, and you're preparing to either run, fight, or hide. And so in that state, we are not, we were not created to be in battle all of the time.
No.
Now, our ancestors could have had a lion approach the cave, and momentarily they would fight the lion and hopefully overcome that. And in a short time frame, that dysregulated nervous system can rebalance over time. In nature, animals who are in a fight for their life and being chased by a lion, they will often, you will see images of those within a few minutes, their body starts to shake a little bit because they're kind of shaking off the intensity, the adrenaline and the cortisol that is flooding the body, which is actually quite toxic to the body over time, because it wears the cells down, it wears the body down. It will upregulate or downregulate a gene expression, and so it makes you more prone to breakdown, more prone to illness and disease, cancers, all of those things that break the body down. So, but in our world today, we live in a world where we're constantly in that state. We have so much media coming at us.
I
There's so much
agree.
propaganda on the television and in the news and on social media, and our attention is darting between all of these areas all of the time. And the average person lives in that dysregulated sympathetic state between 6 and 7 hours every single day. And obviously, it's causing all of us to not feel well. We're all feeling fatigue and exhaustion. Muscles are tight and worn down, and digestion is off, and our brains feel a lot of brain fog. And I mean, I think everybody could relate to that.
It's like on the collective level that we
Yes,
experience the stress response.
correct.
But then because you went through that thing with your husband and all of that was so stressful, then it was even more severe, right?
Yeah, yes, I I wouldn't say that I've had the hardest experience in the world, but it was pretty tough. It
Yeah.
was pretty, and it was a long journey. And have I fully arrived? I have to be honest, no. I don't, but I don't think we ever fully arrive. There's always another level. There's always
Of
another
course.
layer to releasing, and there's still life experiences that we
Sure.
all have.
Yeah.
However, I have an enormous amount of tools that I didn't have before. I have insight and wisdom that I didn't have before. I
Yeah.
have an understanding of our purpose more than I ever had before. And so I feel that even though I can still have challenges that show up, having the information that I share in my book about the healing experience, about how to, and this doesn't even apply to necessarily only health. It applies to recovery from relationship pain. It applies to when your life shatters and everything that you thought was going to be your reality is no longer your reality. And all of a sudden, the path that you were on, the rug gets pulled out from underneath you, and all of a sudden you are in a new normal. And how to navigate that space as lovingly to the self as possible.
Yeah, it's a very different way of experiencing hardship when you have all of that insights and awareness, right?
Yeah.
Than
Yeah,
if you're
absolutely.
just thrown at it.
Absolutely. And nobody goes to school where they say, this is how you're going to navigate your world when your husband gets put in prison and you
No,
lose everything. Nobody
of
goes to
course.
school to say, this is how your world's going to implode when your mother is diagnosed with cancer, or when you lose that job, or when you have a spouse with infidelity, or when life happens, or you lose a child, or any of those experiences that are horrific for the emotional state.
Yeah. Okay, I wanted to comment on all of what you said before. The story, whoa. So I think that struck me also reading your book is that your husband, so there's this thing about getting so stigmatized and, yeah, cut off from the tribe in that he couldn't practice as a medical doctor, but then he did become a healer, right? He was a healer in the alternative and the complementary treatments, right?
Correct. Well, he actually was a healer very early. He had a near-death experience when he was 13.
Right.
He had an experience where it was a young boy. He was up skiing with friends and found a couple of fifths of vodka that was stuck in the snow. And he had never tried it before, thought, he just made a really stupid decision and he drank it. And he went into an alcoholic coma for a few days. And
Crazy. Okay.
so he came back into this realm knowing that he was supposed to help heal.
Okay.
And so that's why he became a doctor. In his world, that was the only way to be a healer in
Sure.
traditional is allopathic medicine. He was a fantastic surgeon. He was a fantastic
Wow.
doctor.
Wow.
But he thought outside of the box. And many doctors today, they're under the umbrella of protection by the medical industry, but they have an agenda, and that is pharmaceuticals. United States is very, very, very damaged in the medical world with pharmaceuticals and opioids and addiction. And now, over the years, we've all obviously learned there's an enormous pool of healers in the world, and it's beautiful that
Yeah.
all of these different modalities are showing up.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then there's the paradox of him being a healer in both one way and the other way. And then he's not able to heal you.
Hmm. Yeah, that was a
Ah,
challenge for both of us. We had to really work through a lot because so many people over the years said, your husband saved my life, your husband saved my life,
yeah.
your husband healed me, I'm here because of your husband, I have my family because your husband healed me, your husband healed me. And he would come home and I would plead, why not me, why
Do
not me?
something. Yeah.
Yes, yes, of course. I was
Mm,
desperate and I was
mm,
in pain
yeah.
and pleading with him, and of course he tried, of course he
Yeah.
did everything. But I think most healers can attest that when you're too far in the forest to see the trees, when you're
Right.
so
Mm,
emotionally attached to the situation, even the most intuitive people on the planet really struggle getting insight for themselves or for direct loved ones because your emotions get in the way, or your perception of what. Or and I think in my understanding, I think because uh, your desires get in the way. You want that person to heal, of course, instead of staying neutral and receiving divine guidance. You have an agenda, and of course you do. Of course you
yeah.
want to heal.
Yeah. Okay. So that's, yeah. But it's so interesting that your life is so, it's so centered around healing in a way, what happened with him and then what happened with you. And I assume also what you're doing now, right, is helping people to recover. So it's so, yeah, so it's such a big piece to your life, isn't it?
I would say so. I would say, as far as my life purpose, I think I came to I use the archetype as the wounded healer. The wounded healer is somebody who has so many wounds themselves and they overcome on the other side of that but with it comes a great deal of compassion and empathy. And you don't want to ever see somebody struggle to the level that you struggled. And so you build tools and support and open your heart in ways to help somebody else on the journey. We are all on this path to wholeness, and there will always be somebody ahead of us, and there will always be somebody behind us. And the proper way of doing that is to learn wisdom, learn and embrace the wisdom that others in front of us have done, and to also turn around and give a hand to the person behind you that is struggling, because you know what they need. And I would have given nearly anything for somebody to come to me and say, honey, you're going to be okay. These are just the
Yes.
to know. But I didn't have that. I had to just navigate on my own. And it, I just, my level of compassion is very, very, very high. My level of empathy is very, very high. And to see pain is very challenging for me. So yes, that's
Because you almost feel it yourself. Is that it?
of
Yeah.
course, very
Yeah.
empathic,
Yeah. Yeah.
very,
So, but you say you didn't have anyone to say that to you, but you had a lot of people. You had healers and different treatments, right, in order to get well. Was that before? Because right now we're talking about before the near-death experience. Did you have healers then, or was it after?
it was after the
Okay.
near-death experience. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, we would go to events. We would try to, like the ayahuasca experience. This was before my body broke down.
Okay. Okay.
My nervous. So that was in July of 2012, and I had my
Okay.
near-death experience of December of
December.
2012.
Yeah. Okay.
I
Okay.
think it opened Pandora's box.
Okay.
I sat on a mat 4,000 miles away from home, and I prayed to God, please heal my trauma and please help me to learn to love myself.
Whoa.
Because I was raised in a family. My father's love was conditional. I was raised in a family where uh, my value was based on my deeds that I accomplished rather than a baseline for my being. And I wanted to just have a seat at the table of worthiness. I struggled so much with worthiness, and having these kind of experiences, you just don't know what you're asking for. And so learning to love yourself is a big challenge if you really put your face to the mirror and you start to look at your shadows and you start to embrace the parts of yourself that you didn't want to see and the parts of yourself that you felt were unlovable and unworthy of love from others. And going through that experience, I get very obstinate because I think nobody should have to endure the level of pain.
Yeah.
And what I experienced, my body's worth loving. Who I am is worth loving.
Yeah. Yeah. So you put it together like that the ayahuasca experience and what you prayed to experience there led to your body breaking down.
I think so. I don't think the ayahuasca caused my near death experience. I think it just started the journey. I
Yeah.
think it was one of the elements, and it was a element of many. I would consider my experience a perfect storm. There was a number of other things. I had some amalgams removed in my teeth, so I had some, and it removed improperly at the time, and I didn't know. And so I had some heavy metal poisoning. I also had H. pylori in the gut. I had E. coli. And then just that constant level of stress. My gut was the lining of my gut was pulverized, and so my body looked at everything as a disruption, that nothing was safe. And just obviously just very depleted and in a high stress state. So there was a number of elements that played part of that, but I think ayahuasca was one of the key players to start this journey.
Right. Well, I empathized with you when you said you were annoyed because your husband got a lot out of it and you didn't with the ayahuasca. And that's just because, yeah, I've experienced the same and we're all on different journeys, right?
Correct. Yes. And he was at a consciousness. He was capable of receiving that. In hindsight, I don't think I was ready. I was a mom, just home with my children for the most part. I considered myself somewhat spiritual person back then. Now I consider myself an incredibly spiritual person.
Yeah.
But at that time, it was elusive. I didn't really understand God. I didn't understand. Uh, my family was in a polygamous relation, grown up in a polygamous community, and I felt like that was a lot of cult like behavior.
Okay.
It was a lot of control of women,
Mm.
and so they left that religion. And so I tried to embrace religion for a while. It just didn't fit in our community that's predominantly a Mormon religion,
Okay.
and there's a lot of elements about it that didn't necessarily resonate for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, and then you had the experience, and yeah, I'd send you some questions, and one of them is around these layers there are to human beings. Because, but do you write that these entities that you meet, these three entities, that they was you, telling you about the different layers?
They, at the time, the words they said is there are many layers to the human embodiment. And as a side note, my career that I do is I'm a past life regression therapist. So I take people into past lives all the time. I've done so for many years, but so I knew that, and I also know, uh, based upon an enormous amount of research and a collaboration of thousands and thousands of different people in through different practitioners, various people all say very similar things about the spiritual level and the physical level. And one thing I think a lot of people, as an example, people question about, say, for instance, grandma dies when they're a young child, and they think, well, gosh, if grandma's going to reincarnate and be back in earth again, if she's going to have another life, based if you believe in reincarnation, which of course I do, but then how is grandma going to be there if she's already back into another life? And the way that I answer that is the spiritual body, the essence who we are, the one that is all encompassing God-like energy. We come from source. That essence of who we are, we don't bring 100% of that into a physical incarnation. There is essence of us that still retains in the physical level, and it can get very broad and a little bit confusing to people, so I don't want to get very far out there. But when we start talking about parallel lives, we talk about dual lives, uh, any of those kind of things, that we don't have, it's not a linear thing, it's all exists in the now, that we can have multiple lives existing at the simultaneously, and that can get that can get lost on somebody, and then it's hard for them to follow. But the base of that is, if we choose a life that we're going to have an enormous amount of challenges, and yes, I chose all of it. I chose all of it.
Ah.
Would I do it again? I don't know. but, but I know that I did choose this. And
Okay.
no matter what your challenge is, you chose it. You chose it for your evolution. This earth experience is not a holiday from the spirit realm. It's not an opportunity to go play. Sure, we are here to have joy. We are here to create. We are here to experience love. But the purpose of life is growth and expansion.
Yeah.
And in order to have that, you have to have some challenges come up. And if you sign up for some challenges that are big ones, you're going to have some spiritual support. We're not going to be thrown to the wolves and say, well, good luck,
Okay.
sink or swim. But we'll always retain an essence of us. Approximately 30% stays in the spirit realm. Now, this is different based upon how big of a life you're going to have, or how much you're going to need all of that essence of you. So there's many elements of that. So, but on average, we don't bring, more than like 60% of ourself into the physical level,
For
and
the
that could
whole
be as little.
lifetime? For the whole,
Correct.
okay, because I've heard that uh, across time, across your lifespan, you'll get more and more of yourself.
I think there is an element of that, but we still will retain most of, a big portion of ourselves that
Right.
will be there.
Okay.
But what you're saying, when we bring more of ourself, I think we have a greater understanding of who we are, and we start to receive that with more compassion for self. We have a more broader view. It was always there, but just our level of comprehension and understanding is more developed. Yes. So with those entities, they said that there are many layers to the physical embodiment. I know that there's the etheric level, and so somebody who does anything from Reiki or some energy work, and somebody who has a deeper understanding of the quantum field, that we're all, the difference between energy and matter is we have the etheric body, which is the closest body to the physical body. It's the bridge between the physical 3D world where we have physical life and our energetic bodies around us. And there's been some amazing science that has been developed that disease is found in the field around the body up to a year before it shows up in the physical body. And so but also all elements are possible. We have all probabilities and possibilities exist within our realm. However, they only exist if you have the consciousness and understanding to tap into that. If you don't, it doesn't exist for you. But when somebody is in a meditative state, they can have, I'm kind of branching off, but all things are possible if we have the right conditions. So there's the etheric body, there's also the emotional body, there's the mental body, and the astral body. Those are the ones that I'm more familiar with. There may be more than that, but that's what I think they were working with. And then there's the celestial body, and I think that was the level that they were working on, is the celestial body.
Is that the body they were washing?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
They did not tell me that, but in my understanding, that's what I would say, is the celestial body was what was being washed.
Oh, this is so interesting.
But in this, I thank you. And the celestial body it holds all consciousness and knowledge. So everything was in that body. All of I think if I liken that was where the computer program, my Akashic records, my life journey, everything that exists in my story of my soul development resided in that body.
Right. Just gonna give it a breath.
Yes, that's that's a lot.
That is a lot.
And I don't want to lose any of your listeners. I hope they understand.
I'm sure they will. It's so great. And I did see the thing about regression on your website, but it was very small, so I didn't know how much of that is in. But that's actually what you do today, is actually regressing.
It's one of the things that I
do.
It's
one of the things. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I'll just put in there that I talk a bit with my listeners about this anxiety that I feel when I'm interviewing right now you. And it is sometimes, it's harder to find the words and, things come out in a weird way. And that's like the external part of it. But the internal part is the worst, And I'm really like trying to be very aware of breathing and staying in my body. But the interesting thing here is that I'm so convinced that it has to do with a past life around this. Because it's so, and also you said the wounded healer is like, I have to do this. But there's also like a big block in me. There's something subconsciously telling me that this is so scary. Can you recognize that sort of situation?
Yes, of course. Of course. I mean, in a few days, I'm going to be speaking in a very large conference in Washington, D.C. And it's, of course, everything in because one thing I'll say is that's unfamiliar. We haven't done it yet. When we have upcoming events, experiences, we don't know how it's going to play out. Of course, your brain's going to look for safety. And then our brain's going to go back in our file cabinet of every time we didn't feel safe, every time somebody called us out. All of that story starts to percolate to the top. We are all in this human experience. All of us have moments where we don't feel comfortable. And I would say our life purpose is never going to show up in ease and just all of a sudden appear. Somebody isn't going to wake up and have all of that network in there. However, that's all purposeful as well, because there is a very, very big difference from somebody. I'm going to use an example. There can be somebody who could be that could go to school and they could specialize in child development or psychology. And they could read a whole bunch of textbooks. They can listen to a number of lectures, and they can download all of that information and take a test on what the book says. There's a very big difference between that individual and somebody who is at home raising different children, somebody who is at home with a family member who has a mental illness or some level of psychosis or some level of health. There's a very big difference from a doctor who can study medical textbooks and take very good tests and be skilled as a medical doctor, and somebody who is in the trenches at home, holding back hair as somebody's vomiting, cleaning up a mess when somebody loses their bowels, somebody who goes to bed at night not knowing if they're going to wake up in the morning. The difference is knowledge. We can have lots of knowledge. There's infinite level of knowledge on this planet because we have the internet. We can Google anything and have the answer within 3 seconds. And wisdom. Yeah. Wisdom is when we integrate it into our network. Wisdom is when we're hardwired to understand on all levels. Wisdom is when we have the emotional component connected to that. So sure, we can intellectually know something, but then we bring in the wisdom with emotion and understanding and empathy and all-encompassing compassion. So yeah, your purpose is not going to be easy. None of us arrive easy, and we don't cross the finish line going, see, that wasn't so hard. All of you just buck up and get to it. No, your purpose is going to like cut you at your knees many times. You're going to wake up questioning it all of the time. But when you say that there's you have to do it, that's language to say there's a compulsion, because and the reason why I understand that is our souls are always pulling the tether, trying to guide us to our destiny. We feel that pull. We feel that compulsion. We may not have the language for it, but we have an understanding that that's something within us that is drawing us in that direction.
Right. Okay. Oh, I love that. And it's a different direction that I thought you would go, because I thought you were like thinking, oh, because in a past life, this happened to you and that's why it's scary today. But then you're actually saying that everyone who's doing their life purpose, living out their destiny, that's going to feel threatening at some level. Is that what you're saying?
Sure. And yes, of course, there's possibilities. I think we've all had multiple lifetimes. Of course, that's an element. And I think, as a regression therapist, I've seen every kind of death you can imagine. Everything from war, famine, battle, poisoning, drowning, hangings, horrible torture in cells. If you think of history, there has been horrific things have happened in human history. We have endured evils that we can't even comprehend. And unfortunately, we're in this world where evil is very, very prominent. There's a lot of darkness on this planet. There's a lot of propaganda. There's a lot of fear mongering, because the darkness thrives on fear. And that exists for sure. So yes, it's very possible. You read in my book how I have this, I met with an astrologer who did the chart behind the chart. And she was looking at that and seeing lifetimes where there was a number of lifetimes that played into where I am today. And they all ended in a very horrible death. So that one's struggling. But as far as that, the astrologer saw the day that I left my body, the words that came up exactly was, "You will be in a fight for your life."
Wow. Well, you've ruined my plan of questions. There was this whole plan. Okay, yes, because the astrologers, there was a few of them, right? You had a few readings done in order to find healing on the other side of your near-death experience. And I was curious about what exactly they had said, and I did look up because I didn't know what day in December it was, so I just looked up December, the beginning of December 2012. And there was a lot of Scorpio emphasis, which has to do with, death, and transforming death into new life. And you are ascendant is Scorpio, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So you say about people with Scorpio in the ascendant that you're gonna have life experiences around life or death matters. So I was like, yeah, you did that. And then your whole, I'm just going to do the astrology now that I've thought
Yes,
about, right?
I'm fascinated. Please
Okay,
do.
good.
Please do.
And then you both have the sun and the moon and a few other things in the 6th house, which is health. It's about health, possibly illness, but recovery, everything around health is in that house. So when I saw that, I also wondered if there is now some practices that you do daily that's really important for you to do rhythmically.
I know that I haven't fully arrived. I know that I still get caught up in the responsibility. And there's, we can know things. It's like somebody who is smoking a pack of cigarettes every day and it has the warning that this can cause cancer. It doesn't stop somebody from smoking.
Of
It's
course.
like somebody who struggles with obesity and can't stop but eating 3 hamburgers at a meal. It doesn't change that because we're all subject to our emotional state. And if we all have challenges where we become unconscious of that, we're just trying to be survival. As an example, this last couple of weeks have been quite challenging. My mother-in-law just barely passed. There's a lot of changes in our family dynamics. My youngest child that we've talked about just went off to university
Oh,
the day after her grandmother passed, and there's transformation
of
always going
course.
on in the
Of
world.
course.
We're all going through some, and I think right now we are in global transformation, and we have to have an awareness that what affects you affects me. How you engage in the world supports or challenges the way I engage in the world. And I think that this is the direction we're all supposed to go through. We come from this space where we focus on our own challenges and we think everything's about us, and nobody could have the challenges that we have, to having an understanding that when there's fires and devastation that destroy an entire community, when there's a global outbreak where many loved ones lose their life, or when
Yeah.
there's reactions to things that are medically suggested that are causing horrific challenges to somebody, and those are not being said in media. What's being said is a lot of propaganda and a lot of uncertainty. So we live right now in a world of enormous uncertainty. But
Right.
with that is such a beautiful opportunity, because when there is uncertainty, there comes a point where we no longer have the permission to look in our outer world to give us the answers, that
Ah.
those answers have always been within. And when we stop and we take a breath and we say, okay, if my role is to love, if my role is to serve, how can I do that best? And are we given the world, are we given everybody in the world the best of us by being in a healthy state? Are we getting the rest that we need? Are we taking care of our physical body? Are we nurturing our relationships? Are we regenerating well? Are we taking time to recover when there's pain? Or are we giving the world the rest of us, which is what is left over when we've just been in this dysregulated state, when we're just stressed and working long hours and we're taking caffeine, trying to just sustain, and we're just in this overstimulated state where we're watching all this media all of the time and we're caught up in the outside world. We have to decide now how we're going to navigate that. Sure. Do I get off balance? Sure. Do I scroll
Of
through social
course.
media? Sure. Do I push myself more than I need to? Of course I do, because I'm a human being. Then I'm like, okay, time to come back, Vic. It's time to come back, nurture self-love, focus on
Yes.
myself, which is really hard as a mom. It's
Yeah,
really
of
hard
course.
when you have
Yeah.
a career, when you take care of other people, and
Yeah.
I feel pulled with so many other things, and the family dynamics with children, and going through a funeral experience and all of that right now. But and of course, preparing for a speaking engagement coming up. So, uh, but I also know that it's going to be very important for me to get back in nature, spend some time alone, do some journaling, deep breathing, meditation, really nourish with bone broth and
Yeah.
stuff that will help nourish me physically, emotionally, and mentally.
Ah, I love it. If listeners know some astrology, maybe they can hear it too. But I definitely heard the Scorpio ascendant that's looking beneath the surface on what's going on in this society, and then your whole sixth house, which is feeling responsible a lot too, because you have a lot of talents, you have a lot of gifts. There's the three we talked about, but there's just you just have a lot of resources to help other people and to serve. So with that talent also comes a responsibility or the feeling of there's some weight to that. And
Absolutely. And that shows up, that manifests physically. I have an enormous amount of nerve pain and damage in my shoulders. I feel the weight of the world all of the time. I just feel this constricted. That you're absolutely right. The physical response to that is an enormous amount of pressure that I carry.
yeah, but then you're a Taurus, and that's what we have as our sun sign carries a lot of wisdom around not only what's very natural to us, but also something like the intention of us. This is, oh, okay, what is it this archetype wants? That's really what I need and sometimes don't do for myself. But that is what you talked about, meditating, nature. It could be music, whatever, like soothes you and helps you find peace.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
That's the astrology part. But yeah, I was happy to read that you had some astrologers there, but they couldn't help you that much, right? And you had other people then, because maybe we two could just like, I know we're in the finishing moments here, but you told me you had maybe a little bit more than an hour, so I'm just gonna stretch it a little bit if
Oh,
it's okay. Okay.
yeah, you're fine. You're good.
Okay,
You're good.
good. So I just thought that on the other side of you come back into your body and you're in so much pain, it aches all over, and 8 months of that. What goes on? I mean, the healers and what else? What actually helps you? Let me ask like that.
Yes. So there's some more elements of that I
Yeah.
think are worth noting. But
Mm.
as far as having the astrology, it was helpful to see that I was going to be in a phase for a while. She told me by the time I'd had that reading, she said there's going to be about 7 more months of this. And I thought, oh my God, I can't handle 2 more minutes of this. So
Okay.
that was really challenging for me. But it also gave me an endpoint. I think we can endure almost anything if we know that there's an end to it.
Right.
And
Yes.
having
Mm.
that a benchmark can be very supportive for us.
Yeah.
Uh, Although that felt daunting, I'll admit. It just felt overwhelming and daunting.
Mm.
And I just kept digging my heels trying to find an answer. And what came through that is uh, I, my daughter, that we hadn't talked about. My daughter got engaged to be married a few months after, about 5 months after I had my near-death experience. And
Wow.
there was times I was able to get out of bed a little bit. Very, very rarely did I leave my home, but I could gingerly walk around the bedroom, or I could be in my home, and just start sipping bone broth. And I started to navigate a little bit. So it wasn't that I was 100% in my bed for those 8 months, but predominantly so. Um, and I wasn't attached to tubes or anything like that. It was just, I just was at a deep, deep healing level. And so when May rolled around and my daughter was engaged to be married, I, um, I thought I was really afraid that I wasn't going to be there. I was afraid that I wouldn't have the strength to support my daughter's wedding. Unfortunately, the other element that played out is the night before my daughter's wedding, our beautiful grandbaby passed away. And so we were in the trenches of emotional pain again. And we could hardly even put on makeup the next morning. We were crying so hard. And for so long, I was just like, it should be against the law to have a wedding and a funeral in the same week. But
Do you know what happened? Do you know the cause of death?
yeah. He was, it's called Big E. Our son and his wife both were carriers. He ended up having her body had threw out antibodies to help, that it was a threat. His body was like a threat. So the body was
Okay.
constantly trying to break him down. So he was delivered premature, just
Okay.
only a few weeks premature though. And in the medical treatments, they did what is called an ECMO, which they bypassed the heart to try to give that strength. And he threw an enormous amount of blood clots in his brain. And so he became clinically dead. That was really challenging. And
Of course.
unfortunately, this was now the 10-year anniversary. August 26th was the 10-year anniversary of his birth. He lived for 5 days, but my mother-in-law was her funeral was on August 26th, and my niece got married the next day after after she had passed. So it's an interesting dynamic our family has been experiencing. But um,
Yeah.
I having my daughter's wedding that was coming up really gave me the fortitude to just get through this. Of course, having it layered with losing our grandchild was very, very painful. But in those moments of weddings and funerals and life and death, there's going to be moments where you feel God's grace around you. There's going to be moments where you feel the celestial world giving you strength. You're able to draw from strength you didn't know existed. You feel that even though it's very, very challenging, there's something about it that feels beautiful. There's something about it that feels sacred, and you start to really be very present in that experience. Even though it's painful, you embrace the presentness, and that's a gift in and of itself, because you start to honor the lives around you. You start to honor your own life. You start to see through the lens of possibility of overcoming this. So, even though horrific things can have some beauty around it.
Yeah. And you chose to come back, to be present to all of that, to all, darkness and light and the anniversaries and the deaths, the
Yeah.
losses.
Yeah.
You chose that.
One of Yeah, I did. And one of the first things that we started in embarking upon is I started taking trainings with mindfulness. And I had studied different forms of meditation a number of times, but I was a classic. I don't have time for this. I have a family to raise, and
Yeah.
I don't, sitting down to meditate is 20 minutes that I missed, that I could have been cleaning my house, and
Yeah.
could have been being more active. And uh, I've had to really shift a lot of that understanding of how I show up in the world. But in this mindful practice, I had this understanding that I was constantly trying to leave my body because I was in a lot of pain. So of course, my soul wanted to disengage. Of course, I wanted to run away from the body. But when I had this complete download and understanding that no matter what my spirit's doing, my physical body had to ride this train out. My physical body still had to experience all of the challenges, all of the pain, all of the muscle tightness and the burning nerves and the nausea and the headaches and just that ache. And I just had this so much compassion for my body of what it was capable to endure. And when I recognized that whether I'm consciously present or not, my physical body has to do this, that I needed to turn around and give it some love and give it some support and get through this. I became a team of my own life. I became a conscious team from a spiritual connection in the physical body, and knew that I needed both of those elements to be key players in order to get through this.
Oh, that sounds good. Being a team inside yourself sounds like it helped you to become more embodied.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I just
descending.
didn't have a choice. Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, and yet that was the choice, right? I know it's something that we say.
Yeah.
I didn't have a
Yeah.
choice because you wanted so much, but it was an actual choice, and that's, I think, is the most beautiful thing about NDAs, is that because we can theorize that we chose this, like you said previously you said something about that we all chose this life, but we don't remember. But now you had this experience where you actually remember choosing this.
Yes.
So that
Yeah.
must make such a big difference.
Yeah. And I hundreds and hundreds of regressions later, I've taken many clients to meeting with it's called the Council of Elders. Many people who do regressions can attest to this, that when we embark on a physical life, it's not just Russian roulette where we just like, okay, I'll choose that lifetime. I'll go live in Europe and I'll have these parents, and one of them will be wealthy and one of them will struggle, because we don't have it from that level. We have many elements. And first of all, we have to decide what we want to work on, what we want to master in this life. For me, this challenge in this life is I wanted to master and overcome immense challenges. That's what I signed up for. That's what I saw. And so I set up a lot of those to make sure that I did.
Yeah.
But we want to master love. We want to master a certain skill that we want. Some people can be very skilled with the arts or music. Uh, we want to enhance our energy field. We want to master the ability to manifest or create. And so somebody who can create, manifest enormous wealth. Some people want to experience all that life can offer. Some people want to travel the world and see what's possible. Some people want to go through enormous challenges and then have enormous gifts show up. You just want to see what the pendulum can swing on how far you can take the human experience. Some people who go into addictions and challenges like that, they want to see how deep they can go and how they can rise back out of that. That's one of the ways that we can look at that. So with that, you're going to have spiritual insight, support. You're going to have suggestions. It's really beautiful because you get to see opportunities, little tidbits about how that life's going to play out, and step into that role. The people in our life that we have as our spouses, our children, our parents, our siblings, co-workers, our neighbors, we've known them before. There's some that feel very familiar. It's like, there's my best friend that I haven't seen in eons. And now we get to figure out how we know each other. And there's some that we have an immediate repulsion, no matter how they present. You're like, don't trust you. Yeah, because there's a past life where you don't trust them. So yeah, all of that's possible.
I'm actually rereading Roger Woolger. You know him, right?
I'm not familiar. No.
Really? Maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong, but it's and I'm now getting confused about the title. It's something like Other Lives, Other Selves or something, but it's all around this previous lives. But that's because, and I assume that our listeners too are somewhat in on, I guess, what could be one of the secrets to healing. But recently there was a documentary here in Denmark with someone who had a near-death experience, and sometimes that's a big thing, right? Because okay, now we can actually talk about this. And what she did in the documentary was that she was in cooperation with someone who could make it into virtual reality, so that we could all experience sort of what she saw there. And we saw how important it was for her to share her experience with others, because it had been so much of a taboo, and she had not been able to really show it. Do you recognize that longing to share about this? Just,
it's really interesting. In my book, I share about that healing experience that I had in Hawaii and taken into different lifetimes. That's how I would equate how, when somebody asked me what that was like, it was very similar to a virtual reality experience, because I was physically in the condo. I was physically present with this healer and her assistant, and my husband were all in the room. But closing my eyes, I was transformed. I was transformed to a different area. Everything changed. Everything was different. I could see and smell, and I was feeling very, very alive. It was very similar to a virtual reality, but all of my senses were engaged. I could feel the vines whipping against my feet. I could smell the blood when I died of all of these different, like when I died of hemorrhaging, giving birth. I could feel the death and destruction of the world around me. But and obviously, if you haven't read my book, you're not familiar with that area. But but that was very similar. And all of those climax moments of the death where there was an enormous amount of trauma that stores in the cellular makeup and it stays with the soul. And we do carry that energy over. We're not a clean slate when we come into this earth. Our minds are to some degree, but our subconscious mind, we have all of that in our cellular memory. Our DNA, there was a long time where they would talk about junk DNA, and a lot of our DNA is junk. No, that's where all of the information and wisdom of our divine self, that's our past lives, our soul journey, our Akashic records are all stored in there. And we do have connection to that. So
So
absolutely.
can I ask you, is it similar having regressions for you to your near death experience? I mean, is it similar in height? What's the biggest
It can
experience?
be.
It can be, right?
It can be if somebody can get deep enough.
Okay.
Every person has their own level of how I would say the ones who struggle the most are the very analytical minds, people who
Yeah.
want to analyze why things are the way they are. The
Yeah.
ones who do really well are the ones who can drop into the theta brainwave state very easily, the ones who can just surrender and observe, the ones who can just engage with the senses do very, very well. I can have a regression where I'll ask a client, where are you? And they'll say, the street sign says 927 Westshire. And I'm standing on a book as London, England. I can see all of these kind of things.
Yeah.
And other people can, depending on their level of depth, is like, it feels like I'm in Ireland. It feels like, just very slight. But so there's different levels.
Yes.
Some
Yeah.
people can get very skilled, and some people it takes a little bit of time.
What's I'm connecting in my mind now that maybe that's why your book, it obviously have that near death experience, but it has so much more. And then maybe that's why, because there are equal levels that you can reach here in this life. It's like
Yeah.
it's just
Oh,
connecting in my mind if that's,
yes.
yeah. Because otherwise you may have written that book on only on what you experienced then, right?
Correct. But I think there is, just like my breakdown, my near death, I cannot attribute one experience. My husband being taken was an enormous trauma, for sure, for sure. But people have traumas all the time, and they can overcome those, and it doesn't necessarily equate. People have a loved one go to prison all the time. People have a loved one die all the time. It doesn't equate that they're going to have a near-death experience and have
No.
completely breakdown. So that's a element, but there's also many elements in the healing journey as well. There's not going to be a single healing experience. I think very, very, very few people can equate that they went all traditional allopathic medicine and was able to get better. You can go to a doctor, and maybe if you needed an antibiotic, or maybe if you needed an anti-parasitic, or something like that, or something to help rebuild the gut, sure, it can help regain some health. But when you go so deep in this healing paradigm and is so deep in the search, that it's going to take a tribe of healers to support you. And I want to make it clear, having a healing experience, a healer's role is not to heal you. A healer's role is not to come in, wave their hands over you, do a prayer, and say you're all better. That can happen under mystical experiences for sure, but it's very, very small. And if we hold out for that, we can lose possibility of our own growth. A healer's role is to hold space for you to acknowledge your capacity to heal yourself. And so once they step out of that ego, once they align to the field within your body, and they can breathe in love and compassion and hold space, it gives you possibility to explore that healing within.
Okay, I'm really glad you said that, because I this is gonna be one of the finishing questions. I can't do all of what I've written here, but there is this question, because I feel it's really important, because you talk about that the body is not attacking itself, and I feel it's related to what you just said. But the reason why, or in what context we speak about the body attacking itself is usually in autoimmune diseases, where this is the logic that's what's going on. So can you tell me why you feel strongly that that is not what's happening?
I've, I haven't studied a zillion medical journals and done a bunch of research to say that you think, but this is something I came back knowing very, very clearly. And I may not know how to articulate it, but I will speak it from the soul
Yes.
rather than from the intellect. That there is an inner intelligence that resides within all of us. And our body and mind are always in communication. Our mind is our thoughts, our body is our emotions are in the body, and they are always in communication. And our subconscious is controlling 95% of the chemicals that are released, the way that we everything, all the processes in the body, the breathing and the regulation of the temperature and the hormones and all of those things are played out without any of our conscious attention. When we are on a healing journey, when we are experiencing something in the body, there is obviously going to be signals that are going on that we're not conscious of. And our body is always trying to signal something. It's always trying to signal something for alignment, where there is either an alarm that something is out of alignment. And when we don't understand what that alarm is, that alarm signal will continue until the brain and the body are cohesive, when we have an understanding. And so when they use now, there's new autoimmune diseases that are diagnosed every single day. I mean, we're in the hundreds now. And what autoimmune means is we don't know.
Yeah.
What we do know is you're showing symptoms. Symptoms is something from the medical world is like, well, these are symptoms that can also play out in many, many different diagnoses. But symptoms are your body's signal that you're out of alignment. So when we focus on an autoimmune, then we're looking from an analytical standpoint, that we're focused on what is, and we're focused on the challenges rather than looking at the symptoms and focusing on having awareness where we are and having an awareness of the direction that we want to go. So there is German new medicine. There's a number of different modalities outside of traditional medicine that is looking that we're in the healing phase. The healing phase can stand for a very long time. And those healing phases are usually when the symptoms themselves actually show up. So I'm very, very against labeling as far as autoimmune, because I could have a lot of labels. But if we have those labels, we start focusing on that, and those labels become our identity. And if we're going to focus on those labels or our identity, we're not going to get healed. We're just not, because we're going to be focused on the victimness of it. We're going to be focused on the label of it. We're going to be, this is who I am now. This is how I want the world to see me. Nobody really wants the world to see us as wounded, broken, and incapable of repair. We want to be seen as lovable. We want to be seen as valuable. We want to be seen as a contributor to society. And we have to always ask ourselves, what are we capable of doing? And in order to do that, we have to look at our shadows. We have to see where we have allowed this disalignment to happen. I can look back and find 1,000 reasons why my body was dysregulated.
Yeah.
But I can also look forward and say, there's 1,000 reasons why I have value and I'm worthy of healing.
Yes.
So which way am I going to put my attention?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really big in your book as well. Putting keeping the focus there at the healing, rather than, I guess, this little inner child also has this desire to, be pitied. And, someone to think that, someone to empathize with them, I guess.
We all want to be seen for who we are.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we have experiences in life where we show up how we think other people want to see us. And then you get to a point that said, no, I'm actually worthy of being who I am, exactly like this, right here, right now. Yeah. Lovable.
Lovable. Thank you so much, Vicki Werner. Can I just I've started to do these screenshots. Can I take a photo of us? Okay, let me see. I think it's gonna make a sound. It's good.
Fantastic.
We look really good. Okay, so just to close this really, I love your message. I really do. And it fits very well with evolutionary astrology that I do. So, but do you have anything just that you want to say to the listeners if they are struggling to heal? Because the title is the secret to recovery and healing. Do you have any secret that you could share here in the end? Just a little one.
I will share 3 things that I think every person needs to know.
Great.
1, all life has value, and it doesn't take dying to figure that out. You have value because you exist. 2, healing is not a passive experience. Healing is a conscious decision to embrace your shadows and your fears. But if you choose to embark on what is possible, you will reveal the greatest gifts that you were born here to share with others. And 3, the greatest gift you can give yourself and others is love, because love is the ultimate healer.
Wow. I love that about the active. I mean, that's the opposite of a passive healing. So it's active. Yeah.
I think, passive healing, it's like when somebody dies and they think time is healing all wounds and, eventually you'll move on. What that's really doing is you're just creating a new normal, that you're filling that void with other things. But healing, if I were to just lay in bed and wait for my healing to take place, it never would have happened.
Wow.
But if I decided to say, how can I contribute to my healing? If I can say, how did I contribute to my illness? How can I engage in a more loving way? And how can I move forward? It doesn't mean more active doing. It's not working harder and striving and pushing ourselves into healing. It's engaging in the flow of healing. It's allowing the circumstances to come together to allow the healing process to take place. But you have to remain conscious, because when you fall out of that and you go back into the victim mentality and you become a story of your past and you repeat that story over and over, you're stuck. And so when you engage and say, I'm worthy of love today, and what is one step, what is one thought, what is one emotion that I can engage in that will give more love to my body, then you're leaning in the direction of healing and whole.
I feel it's so valuable and powerful coming from you, because you know what it's like. And I feel it's so tempting when you have been sick to keep repeating it, because you kind of want someone to hear how hard it has been on you. So to have this turnaround from you, that is really powerful. Keep focus on the healing, keep focus on what you deserve, and be aware of that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Vicki, for your time. And I know that it's gonna go really great with the conference, because you have so much wisdom in you. So no matter if you're shaking or anything, it's still gonna come out.
Yeah. It just, sometimes we have to just allow and see whatever happens, because it was all orchestrated. It's all good.
It's all good. Yeah. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. God bless you. Thank you so much for having me.